Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm AYODHYA and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says India's illegal actions of 5th of August have brought the freedom of occupied Kashmir even closer. Addressing the Jammu and Kashmir Parliament on Kashmir Siege Day, Khan said India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi made the biggest blunder of his life by illegally annexing the valley last year in August. The Senate of Pakistan has unanimously adopted a resolution condemning India's illegal actions in occupied Kashmir. Tabled by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the resolution calls for a just resolution of the Kashmir dispute under the UN Security Council resolutions. The Pakistan Army says Indian troops have martyred an 18-year-old girl in unprovoked fighting in the hot springs sector along the line of control. In a statement, the military's media wing said 6 people were also wounded in the fighting. It added that Pakistani troops effectively responded to the Indian aggression. In Lebanon, the death toll from the explosion in central Beirut has risen to 100 with over 4,000 injured. The cause of the explosion remains unclear, but officials have linked the blast to ammonium nitrate being stored in a warehouse at the port. The global number of COVID-19 deaths has crossed 700,000, with infections exceeding 18.5 million. Latin America has reported the highest death toll, with more than 206,000 losing their lives to the disease. Brazil, the second worst hit country, has recorded over 1,100 deaths in the last 24 hours, increasing the tally to nearly 96,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 15 people have died, while 675 have tested positive overnight, increasing the tally to over 281,000 cases. And in cricket, Pakistan are batting first in the opening test of a 3-match test series against England at Old Trafford. The match is being played in a biosecure bubble due to the coronavirus pandemic. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says India's illegal actions of the 5th of August have brought the freedom of occupied Kashmir even closer. Addressing the Jammu and Kashmir Parliament on Kashmir Siege Day, Khan said India's PM Narendra Modi made the biggest blunder of his life by illegally annexing occupied Kashmir and last year in August. Khan said Modi made this blunder on 3 key assumptions that all proved wrong. He said the Indian Prime Minister thought that the West would back his moves to get New Delhi's help against China. Khan said Modi assumed that Pakistan will remain docile over its annexation and the brutal atrocities will break the spirits of Kashmiris. But Pakistan's Prime Minister said every single one of these assumptions fell flat in his face. Khan said the world's view of the Kashmir cause has changed overwhelmingly in favor of Pakistan's stance because of Islamabad's diplomatic efforts. He assured that Pakistan will continue to be the loudest voice of Kashmiris at all regional and international forums till they get their freedom. The Senate of Pakistan has unanimously adopted a resolution condemning illegal Indian actions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Tabled by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the resolution calls for a just settlement of Kashmir dispute under the UN Security Council resolutions. The resolution demanded India stop its illegal measures to change the demographic structure of the occupied territory. The resolution also urged the international community to hold India accountable for its human rights violations in Kashmir. Pakistan has urged the UN Security Council to meet over India's military siege in occupied Kashmir. In a letter to the Security Council President, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi highlighted human rights violations in the area and subsequent attempts by India to change its demography. He said India's ceasefire violations along the LOC and belligerence towards Pakistan pose a threat to regional peace and security. Qureshi in his letter also pointed out India's abduction of Kashmiri youth, the ongoing systematic torture and extrajudicial killings. He said these atrocities epitomize New Delhi's brutality in suppressing the resistance movement against Indian occupation for over 7 decades. Turkey says the annexation of Jammu and Kashmir is a threat to peace and stability in the region. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesman Hami Aksoy said the situation has further complicated since the abolition of Kashmir's special status. Aksoy reiterated Turkey's call for dialogue to resolve the issue under the UN resolutions. Ankara's statement comes on the first anniversary of India's revocation of occupied Kashmir's special status. Jammu and Kashmir was also split into 2 federally administered territories. Since then, the valley has been under a communications blackout and harsh movement restrictions. Pakistanis and Kashmiris living around the world are observing the 5th of August as Kashmir Siege Day. The day marks 1 year since India illegally stripped the region of its autonomy in violation of the UN resolutions. A curfew has been imposed in several parts of the region in the wake of the protests planned by anti-India groups to mark the 5th of August as Black Day. Our correspondent Isa Naqvi from Islamabad has more in this report.
5th of August marks a year of unabated terror, unleashed on the residents of what many call heaven on earth. This day reminds the world how it kept silent on the incarceration of 8 million people, young and old, men and women, the sick and even the children.
5th August 2019 will always remain as a very dark day in the long-standing saga of the freedom struggle of the people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The illegal unilateral actions by India seeks to change the ground situation and unleash a brutalization and organized, deliberate, choreographed brutalization of the people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
During the past 1 year, Indian security forces have been brutalizing Kashmiris with full impunity to persecute innocent civilians, demanding their just right to self-determination.
Powers given to security forces were always draconian, but the new ones that have been given now and under which extrajudicial killings have become the norm, as I said earlier, have taken this brutalization of the innocent people of Kashmir to an unprecedented level. And the worst part is that there is complete impunity with which they operate, and they have, so to speak, blessings of the government of India.
Despite crushing curfew, communication blackout, mass incarcerations and extrajudicial murders, India has been unable to suppress the Kashmiris' call for freedom. Experts say the frustration of Indian government has found a new vent.
Whenever there are frustrations within India, then they sometimes boil over along the line of control or on the border with Pakistan. What we have seen in the last few months is extreme frustration by the Indian troops, by the Indian government.
India has indulged in deliberate, unprovoked ceasefire violations at the line of control to divert the attention of international community and hide its crimes in the occupied Kashmir. This year alone, India has committed over 1,800 ceasefire violations. Since its illegal actions in violation of UN resolutions, India has martyred 214 innocent Kashmiris and wounded around 1,400. But the chants for freedom from Indian oppression echo louder in the occupied Kashmir today. Reporting for Indus News, Isa Naqvi, Islamabad.
The international community has been criticizing India since it illegally revoked the special status of occupied Kashmir on the 5th of August last year. Lawmakers in the US, the UK and other regional and international bodies are criticizing India, urging it to respect Kashmiris' rights. More in this report.
The Organization of Islamic Cooperation was the first to react with concern and reiterated its solidarity with the people of occupied Kashmir. The organization called for the immediate lifting of the curfew, restoration of communication and respect for fundamental rights of Kashmiris. The UN Secretary General said the Kashmir issue needed to be resolved bilaterally and by peaceful means. Also, the United Nations Security Council held a closed-door meeting for the first time ever after India's controversial move. European Union lawmakers also criticized India for changing the constitutional status of the region in violation of UN resolutions. In the UK, a group of British MPs from the opposition Labour Party issued a letter to the Prime Minister demanding that London strongly condemn India's actions. In February this year, India denied visas to British MP Debbie Abrahams after she landed at the New Delhi International Airport. But in stark contrast to New Delhi's arrogance, Abrahams was welcomed by Pakistan and carried out a joint press conference with Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, praising Islamabad's progressive stance on the Kashmir conflict. Over in the US, a congressional panel said Indian-occupied Kashmir is facing a humanitarian crisis and called New Delhi's annexation a disaster for Kashmiris. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has always been a vocal supporter of Pakistan's stance on Kashmir, and during his address to the Pakistan's National Assembly in Islamabad, he slammed India for its unilateral steps and pledged to support Pakistan. Dissident voices are also being heard from within India, asking Prime Minister Narendra Modi-led government to restore the special status of occupied Kashmir. Human rights activists in India say Modi has tarnished India's secular image by illegally annexing the occupied territory.
International media outlets and newspapers bashed India over the unilateral revocation of occupied Kashmir's special status. On this day last year, Delhi scrapped Article 370 of its constitution and declared the valley a union territory.
India flooded 80,000 troops into the valley, detained thousands and imposed harsh movement restrictions and communications blackout. Global media slammed New Delhi for its oppressive actions in the territory and called it out on its atrocities. British newspaper The Guardian wrote, "This sudden move will have consequences for India that are difficult to predict." American newspaper New York Times said India silenced the voice of Kashmir before passing the controversial bill. The Independent wrote, "Through this decree, the Modi government has shut the door for a democratic, peaceful solution in Kashmir." Calling out the move, Al Jazeera headlined India's suspension of Article 370 as the darkest day for democracy in the country. Turkish broadcaster, the TRT World, called out New Delhi on its attempts to change the demography of the occupied valley and said it has plunged the territory to new lows.
The Pakistan Army says Indian troops have martyred an 18-year-old girl in unprovoked fighting in the hot spring sector along the line of control. In a statement, the military's media wing said 6 people were also wounded in the fighting. It added that Pakistani troops effectively responded to the Indian aggression. 15 people have been killed in nearly 1,900 ceasefire violations by India since the start of this year. Pakistan has strongly condemned the construction of Hindu temple at the site of the demolished Babri Mosque. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Indian Supreme Court's verdict on the construction of the temple reflects the subjugation of minorities in India. It urged the Indian government to ensure safety, security and protection of minorities, particularly Muslims. The Foreign Office also called on the global community and the UN to play their part in saving the Islamic heritage sites in India. Earlier, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid the foundation stone for the temple at the site of the historic mosque in AYODHYA. In 1992, Hindu mobs demolished the medieval mosque, leading to bloody riots in which hundreds of Muslims were killed. In Lebanon, the death toll from the explosion in central Beirut has risen to 100, with over 4,000 injured. The blast sent shockwaves across the city, causing widespread damage even on the outskirts of the capital. President Michel Aoun says over 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate used in fertilizers and bombs was being stored at the port for 6 years without safety measures. He called for a probe into the cause of the blast, with the result to be released within 5 days. Leaders from around the world have expressed sorrow over the tragedy. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said his country stands in solidarity with the Lebanese brethren in their difficult hour. Prime Minister Hassan Diab said Beirut is mourning and all of Lebanon is facing a catastrophe.
What happened today won't pass without accountability. Those responsible will pay the price for what happened. This is a promise for the martyrs and the wounded. This is a national commitment. Facts will be revealed about this dangerous warehouse that has been there since 2014.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Sri Lankans are heading to polls today to elect a new parliament. Pre-poll surveys show President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's party is widely expected to win. Rajapaksa is seeking a two-thirds majority in the 225-member legislature to implement his economic and national security agenda. The tourism-dependent island is struggling since deadly militant attacks last year, followed by the economic setback of the pandemic. Country's election commission has put strict social distancing rules in place to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Votes will be counted on Thursday. In Libya, Togo tribes have filed a lawsuit at the International Criminal Court against Khalifa Haftar over last year's massacre in Marzouk city. In a statement, tribal leaders said the lawsuit seeks to punish those who bombed residential areas in the city. They said the massacre was intentional and alleged that warplanes belonging to the UAE were involved in the raids. On August 4th last year, 40 people were killed and dozens wounded in an airstrike on Marzouk. Meanwhile, the US says it is deeply troubled by escalating tensions in Libya, warning that any intensification will only prolong the conflict. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien has said efforts to escalate the conflict are a risk to collective security interests. Egypt says it has decided to withdraw from the latest round of trilateral negotiations over Ethiopia's dam on the Blue Nile. In a statement, the Egyptian Water Ministry said Ethiopia's draft proposal lacks regulations on the operation of the dam. The ministry said the proposal also lacked a legal mechanism for settling the disputes. Meanwhile, Sudan has also threatened to withdraw from the talks, saying Ethiopia insisted on linking the talks to renegotiating a deal on water sharing. China has criticized the upcoming visit of U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar to Chinese claimed Taiwan. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said Taiwan remains the most important and sensitive issue in Sino-U.S. relations. He said Beijing opposed any official interactions between Washington and Taipei and had lodged stern representations with the U.S. This will be the highest level visit to the territory by a U.S. official in 4 decades. Despite having no formal diplomatic ties with Taipei, Washington remains its main arms supplier and strongest ally on the international stage. Beijing deems Washington's recent advances towards Taiwan a violation of One China policy that US pledged to respect in 1979. China says it does not want tensions with the US to escalate any further. China's ambassador to the US, Cui Tiankai, said that the world's top 2 economies should cooperate instead of confronting each other. Speaking at the virtual Aspen Security Forum, Cui urged both nations to learn from history, saying a new Cold War will not benefit anyone. He said Washington and Beijing were continuing collaboration and making progress on the Phase 1 trade deal. Choi said Beijing was ready to solve the dispute over the South China Sea through negotiations with other countries. This follows a surge in bilateral tensions over tit-for-tat consulate closures, media row, and Chinese app TikTok. The global number of COVID-19 deaths has crossed 700,000, with infections exceeding 18.5 million. Latin America has reported the highest death toll, with more than 206,000 losing their lives to the virus. Brazil has recorded over 1,100 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the tally to nearly 96,000.
The Americas continue to be the hardest hit region in the world by the coronavirus pandemic. Brazil has the second highest number of infections and death tolls in the world. Mexico is not too far behind, reporting the second highest number of cases and deaths in Latin America. In the US, President Donald Trump insists that lockdowns are not needed even as the country's cases near 4.8 million. But the news of progress from Novavax vaccine trials has given hope.
We give them two shots. After the second shot, we take some blood. We mix that blood that has the antibodies in it that could be protective, and we mix that with virus, and we see if the virus will grow. And you actually dilute that out, and that can actually give you a measurement of how much antibody you have. And so the striking thing about our vaccine is that it gives you a lot of antibody. It should be very protective.
In Europe, the virus is on the rebound as Germany reported more than 700 cases overnight. France reported a rise in intensive care patients for the first time since April. In Australia, the second most populous state of Victoria has reported a surge in cases and deaths and imposed a strict lockdown.
If we all continue to do as we should, making better choices, then we'll keep our community safe and we will get to the other side of this. The alternative, of course, is these restrictions lasting for much longer than they should.
Meanwhile, in Asia, mainland China has reported a further decline in daily cases, with under 30 cases reported overnight. In South Korea, authorities are fighting to get the virus under control as both local and imported cases rise.
The COVID-19 is on a steady decline in Pakistan, with over 254,000 recoveries. The Health Ministry says there are now nearly 21,000 active infections in the country. The ministry said the death count has risen by 15 to 6,014. It said 675 tested positive in the last 24 hours, increasing the tally to over 281,000. The ministry said 872 patients are in critical condition. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 122,000 infections, while Punjab has over 93,000. Iran and Azerbaijan have discussed ways to increase economic cooperation to minimize the fallout of COVID-19. Iran's Economy Minister Farhad Dejpasand and Azerbaijan Deputy Prime Minister Shaheen Mustafayev spoke in a telephone conversation. Mustafayev and Dejpasand are chairing the Intergovernmental Commission on Economic Cooperation between the two countries. They called for observing health protocols and leaving the two countries' crossings open for trade and transit exchanges. The two sides also agreed on the importance of expanding cooperation in the energy sector. They also discussed the unification of power transmission networks of Iran, Azerbaijan and Russia. Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi has filed a candidacy application for a parliamentary election to be held in November. Aung San Suu Kyi leads the ruling National League for Democracy, also known as NLD. She submitted an application at an election commission office in Yangon. The NLD aims to maintain its majority in the parliament by fielding candidates in almost all electoral districts. The party won a landslide victory in the previous election in 2015 after more than half a century of military rule. The election is scheduled for November 8th, with political parties to start campaigning early next month. The Walt Disney Company has posted a loss of $4.7 billion in the third quarter of the fiscal year. The company said the loss in revenue was largely down to the pandemic and forced closures at parks and other public places. The restrictions also suspended cruise ship sailings, guided tours, and delaying or cancelling theatrical releases and stage play performances. Disney CEO Bob Chapek said despite the economic challenges, global consumer businesses grew thanks to streaming service Disney+. Chapek said the on-demand services business had exceeded 100 million paid subscriptions. European stocks are trading higher as regional countries hesitate over imposing fresh COVID-19 lockdowns and pledge opening up the economy. London's FTSE has risen over 1% as record gold prices power miners, while insurer Hastings Group soared after agreeing to a $2.2 billion buyout offer. Paris's CAC 40 and Frankfurt's DAX have also gained nearly 1%. Earlier bourses in Asia Pacific traded mixed. Mainland Chinese shares Seoul's Kospi and Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained. And in cricket, Pakistan's top order stumbled, giving away 2 wickets in the first hour of the first test against England at Old Trafford. England's fast bowler Jofra Archer dismissed Abid Ali, while Pakistan's skipper Azhar Ali fell to Chris Woakes. Opener Shan Masood and Babar Azam will resume the second session, seeking to pressure home team's bowlers. Team England is in form, having played against West Indies last month and winning the series 2-1. The 3-match series is being played in a biosecure bubble due to the coronavirus pandemic. Pakistan won a test series in England in 1996, though 3 of the 5 since have been drawn, including their last 2 visits in 2016 and 18. Now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.